Welcome everyone. I'm coming to you from a little town by the name of Yorba Linda here in Southern California. Now, while I am not up to date on current candidates and political issues, I am very enthralled by political history, especially when that political history is knee-deep in controversy. And today's subject is no exception. I am right here at the Richard Nixon Library, Museum, and Birthplace. And there is something on the back of the property that is very interesting that I would like to show you. Do you want to see it? Do you? Join me. Shall you? Now, while I'm very fascinated with the life and presidency of Richard Nixon, I am even more fascinated by the fact that he was the only president to resign from office.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
And this resignation happened one day before I was born. On August 8, 1974, Richard Nixon gave his very last speech as President of the United States, announcing the fact that the following day at noon, he would be leaving the White House grounds forever. After the announcement was made to the world, Richard Nixon had one final evening in the White House. The very next day, after he stayed up most of the night reminiscing about what he had done, thinking about the past, and looking forward to what his future might have in store for him, himself and his family walked along with Gerald Ford, who would become the next president of the United States. His predecessor and his vice president would be taking over for him as president. They walked along together down the grass onto a helicopter. The helicopter lifted in the air and took off, and President Nixon looked back at the White House, at his mistakes, at his past, and never came back to the White House as president again. Wow, this place is awesome. This whole property is very beautiful. Not only do they have the house that Richard Nixon was born in, but this is where he is buried. In fact, his funeral happened right here on this little hill. They removed this fence, which was there before his passing, and they placed seats all here where this parking lot is now, and all of the presidents who were still alive at that time attended his funeral. And right in here was the ceremony, and Bill Clinton gave a speech on a stage right there with the backdrop of his birth house.
And on behalf of a grateful nation, we bid farewell to Richard Milhouse Nixon.
And now for what I have been really looking forward to. Directly in front of me is the helicopter used by many different presidents, but best known and will forever live in infamy as the helicopter that Richard Nixon took from the White House and departed for the very last time. Unfortunately, I'm not being allowed to film inside the helicopter, but most of the stuff that you remember is from the outside anyway. If you watch that old classic news footage, Nixon gave that famous victory stance right there in that exact doorway. Right inside this window was the seat There was Nixon's presidential chair inside the helicopter, and he was sitting in his chair, pulled the drapes back, and was looking out that window, his final look at the White House.
As he peers back from that seat in the helicopter,
What a scene
of the
there.
White House as President of the United States. By the time he comes back to this point, if indeed history decrees that he does at any point, he will of course no longer be the President.
May the day of judging President Nixon on anything less than his entire life and career come to a close.
Of course, you know this very famous photo of Nixon and Elvis. I was born the day after Nixon resigned, and I was also born in the same town that Elvis was born, Tupelo, Mississippi. Bizarre? You decide. Well, this isn't good. I have officially locked my keys in my van. There's the top of my microphone, and there are my keys. And the door is locked. Man. Great. I guess Nixon wasn't the only one. Nixon wasn't the only one that made a mistake. Happens to the best of us.